They will regret opposing me.
Hello, I am Raider. I'm a multi-seasonal Challenger top laner who has played over 2000 games in Challenger ELO with my Darius. My ranked accomplishments so far have been Season 11 Challenger EU West and Rank 3 EU NE, Season 12 Rank 8 EU West, Season 13 Double Challenger 1000 LP, and as of Season 14 so far, I'm currently 900 LP Challenger. I'm one of the only Darius players on EOS who consistently hits Challenger every single season with the champion, and I'm going to give you a little insight into how I play Darius. For the runes on Darius, you will always go for the precision page with Conquer, Triumph, Tenacity, and Last Stand. I simply believe these are the best runes that complement Darius' playstyle. Conquer for extended trades which Darius excels at, Triumph heals him after a close 1v1, 1v2 situation, Tenacity helps him against CC which prevents him from sticking as hard as possible to his targets, and finally, Last Stand, which gives him damage when he is low on health as he typically reaches less than 50% in most scenarios due to the time needed to accumulate his stacks. There is, however, situations where I would run Lethal Tempo over Conqueror in matchups such as Gwen, Olaf, Mordekaiser, Irelia, Tahm Kench, and Wukong, where you need the extra attack speed which allows you to accumulate your stacks more rapidly to win the all-ins. As for the second rune page, I go Resolve in 90% of my games, while in the other 10% I pick Sorcery with Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, and that's only exclusive to ranged matchups where I really need the extra movement speed such as Vayne and Quinn. In the Resolve tree I always go Overgrowth, since after the recent patch, Unflinching's Tenacity got removed, therefore this is the rune that Darius benefits the most from since it helps with his survivability. And for the second one, I either pick Bone Plating, in matchups where there isn't much poke and I'm more likely to look for long trades. Contrary to that, I take Second Wind, in matchups where I'll be taking more short trades or where I'm being poked more. As for the keystones, I always run attack speed and 2 health scaling keystones because the new ones like the movement speed, slow, and resistances don't really make that much of a difference, and you get way more value out of the 2 health scaling ones plus Overgrowth. So when you get to mid to late game, you get around 3 ruby crystals worth of HP, which greatly helps with your survivability. That's all there is to it for the runes. Here's a little summary on the screen that sums everything up, and now let's move on to the next section. For starting items, I go for Doran's Shield in like 80% of my games. The reason being is in most matchups, enemy laner will just respect Darius' all-in potential and choose to just short trade with you as much as they can, and because of that, you will get way more value out of Doran's Shield than you would with Doran's Blade. The only scenarios where you go Doran's Blade are the ones where you absolutely need it, level 1 to 3, to zone the enemy laner or to win the early all-ins like Irelia. Moving on to the core items, this is where it gets interesting and what ultimately separates the good Darius players from the bad ones, so let's break it down slowly. There are 3 core items that I build on Darius depending on the draft. Trinity Force I build into drafts that include 2 to 3 melee champions that will want to go into me and can't really disengage easily. Stridebreaker I build into drafts that also include 2 to 3 melee champions, but the only difference is if they are champions that can disengage easily against me, or it's harder to 1v1 them without the extra kiting and slow like Aatrox and Fiora. Titanic Hydra I build into drafts that include mostly ranged champions and barely any melee champions. In most ranged drafts, once you hook them in, if you don't get your stacks as soon as possible or kill them, you're kinda useless after it. So the idea of the items is the extra auto attack from Titanic allows you most of the time to get your 5 stacks to kill them fast from that one hook you do in a teamfight or the one time you get the chance to hit them. One thing to add, whenever I build Titanic I buy a hardbound axe and I sit on it until last item and build as usual since you have a great lack of attack speed without Trinity or Stridebreaker. So this will compensate for the missing attack speed. As for the second item, most Darius players prioritize going Sterak second into resistance items third like Jack's Show. But for me personally, I care more about creating a balanced build which allows me to not only be tanky, but also mobile enough and strong. In a lot of games you want to adapt your tier 2 boots to what you're going to build second or third. So what do I mean by that? The way I usually build boots in laning phase is I only rush tier 2 boots in matchups I particularly need them to win the early trades like Set or Kled, or to survive the laning phase if the enemy top laner is a ranged champion. Otherwise, I just match the tier 2 boots, meaning if the enemy top laner buys them, I buy them as well since the movement speed is a big problem for Darius and not matching boots tier 2 will put you at a great disadvantage. If the enemy top laner doesn't upgrade his boots and the 2 conditions we talked about earlier don't exist, I don't upgrade my boots until I finish building my first item. So that's when we build tier 2 boots. Now let's talk about which boots we build and how do we base our second and third items off of them. For me to demonstrate this, I'm going to give an example. Enemy team is composed of Aatrox, Lilia, Syndra, Jinx, and Leona. Aatrox isn't fed, Jinx isn't fed, Lilia, Syndra, and Leona equal a lot of CC. So what I will do is go Mercs here, since Tab Eyes would only give me value against Jinx auto attacks, who isn't fed in this example. And then I would go Force of Nature into Sterax to prevent getting bursted down by Syndra and Lilia. However, if the Jinx was fed, and even if Aatrox wasn't fed, I would then build Tab Eyes but still go Force of Nature. Why? Because Tab Eyes on its own is probably one of the strongest damage reduction items in the game because of its passive, which reduces on-hit damage by 12%. You avoid building any armor items and get the opportunity to focus more on building against the other two threats on the enemy team early on by building Force of Nature and Sterax. Then you can focus on stacking more resistances and mobility like Jack Show into Deadman's Blade. The way I go about deciding whether I go Deadman's or Force of Nature second depends on how many AD or AP champions they have. If they have more AD, I'll go Deadman second, and if they have more AP, I'll go Force of Nature. Your decision making into what items you build on this champion will separate the good Darius from the bad one. It really all comes down to matchup knowledge and experience. Here are a couple of other scenarios to help you understand. If the enemy team has 2 or 3 melee champions with stick on you, build Trinity into Sterax, into Jack Show, into movement speed items 4th and 5th like Deadman's or Force of Nature. If the enemy team has 1 or 2 melee champions who stick on you, but they have a mobile comp overall, you get Deadman's or Force of Nature 2nd, Sterax 3rd, then Jack Show 4th. And finally, you build either Deadman's or Force of Nature depending on what you decided to pick first. If the enemy team has 1 or no melee champions who stick on you, focus on getting double movement speed items, those being Deadman's and Force of Nature, to catch up to the range champions, then Sterax 4th and finally Jack Show last. This is my mindset on how I go about building items on Darius, and with that let's move on to the next section. Jumping into gameplay, first off is the early game. Darius is one of the strongest early game top laners in the game, which means he has lane authority most of the time. That being said, the goal with this champion is to maximize your gold generation and kill pressure to the fullest. So in early game, you must create a lane state that lets you scale like freezing or slow pushing, which puts enemies in a position where they are in danger of getting ganked or you running them down with Ghost. If you apply this, your wave will be very big because of slow pushing, which will discourage junglers from ganking your lane, since Darius can turn a lot of 1v2 situations into double kills, because his passive gives them large amounts of AD once it's fully stacked. As for trading in early game, first off you trade by using your Q a lot to poke the enemy champion, but at the same time avoid hitting the minions to not break the freeze or speed up the push unnecessarily. Second, when you pull the enemy laner towards you with E, you should Ghost if you're planning to all in them, but ideally you try keeping it unless you really need to use it. You shouldn't always rely on starting a fight with your E. What you should do instead is try walking up or ghosting towards them and get your stacks, then you use your pull once they decide to use their escape, that way you secure the kill. Second off is the mid to late game. With Darius, you want to stay in the side lane as much as possible, because your champion can only fight with his summoners up because he really lacks mobility. So you want to spend most of your time split pushing to get yourself ahead as much as possible in XP and gold, taking enemy camps along with your own camps when your jungler is on the opposite side of the map. You only want to group for teamfights when objectives are coming up and when you have pushed out your wave on the side. Otherwise, you just continue doing your own thing. The reason behind my success with the champion in solo queue is my really high CS per minute and me always being a few levels ahead of everybody. For the teamfights, you can play the fights in 2 ways. 1. Focus on one target to get your 5 stacks and transition them over to the rest of the targets. 2. Use your ult to execute someone low and get your stacks right away. Basically, in most situations, the way you want to play as Darius in fights is start them slow, and the second you get your 5 stacks, you go all in. Summoners are really simple. You always want to take Flash and Ghost because Darius' greatest weakness is mobility and his inability to stick on his targets. The champion simply doesn't benefit better from other summoner spells. It's impossible for me to cover all the matchups with Darius in one video, as this will take hours, but here are the hardest matchups for this champion. First off, since Darius lacks mobility, this simply means ranged top laners are his biggest problem. You can't go around that. The only way to win these type of matchups comes down to how good they space against you and how well you play around that, because the smallest misstep by them can allow you to engage them and take them down. Other than that, those matchups are extremely difficult. Second, matchups against champions who deny auto attacks or are hard to hit accurately with Q or E, so trading against them can be quite annoying. Some of these champions are Wukong, Jax, and Akali. In these types of matchups, it all comes down to raw mechanics, how you play the trades in the waves, and space between the auto attacks. In the description, there will be a detailed matchup spreadsheet for every possible Darius matchup on top lane, but if you want to see these tips applied live, you can watch me on twitch.tv raidergo. I stream daily and I mostly play Darius. This pretty much sums up the whole guide. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you found my guide helpful, and follow me on Twitch again. The links will all be in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, and you can also join my Discord server to catch me when I go live and chat with the community. Thank you for watching.